Good afternoon. My name is Phumza Macanda of the National Treasury. As many of you know, the Minister of Finance with a delegation from Business and Labour traveled to the UK and the United States last week on an investor roadshow with international investors. Today, the Minister is here to report back. On the stand, the Minister is joined, and I will start from my left, the Deputy Governor of the Reserve Bank, Mr. Daniel Minele, Mr. Jabuma Buza representing Business, Mr. Joseph Maqhekeni representing NACTU, and Mr. Kas Kuvadia, who also traveled with the Minister to overseas. I will now hand over to the Minister, who will make remarks. After that, we will take questions. Thank you. Minister.
Well, good afternoon to all of you. It's so nice to know that so many of you are interested in what investors think about South Africa. And of course, you know that that's the only issue we're discussing this afternoon. So prepare yourself for that. Traditionally, the National Treasury, immediately after the budget and the medium-term budget policy statement, undertakes a roadshow. Sometimes it's called a deal roadshow, at other times it's called a non-deal roadshow, meaning we're either looking for money or we're not looking for money. So this was a non-deal roadshow. My Director General advises me that I have to specify that, otherwise we get into trouble with the SEC in the United States. And it was very encouraging to have a number of business leaders, trade union leaders, at one or other stage during this 1 week, very tough ride across the globe. We started in London, went to Boston, and then to New York, and then got back. Now, amongst the people who are sitting here that were part of the road show, they're going to take a bow, you see. The Director General, who led the National Treasury team, you stand up and take a bow normally. Colin Coleman, representing himself. Wendy Lucas Bull, Dennis George, and the boss of this enterprise here, Nikki Newton-King. A number of officials who are sitting behind them, and in addition to the two trade union leaders we have here, we had Jojo James, the senior deputy president of COSATU, who was with us but is unable to be here. So Mr. Maqhekeni is representing all three union federations. Of course, in front of you, you have Mr. Kuvadia of the Banking Association. I don't know whether he wants to sit and take a bow or stand and take a bow. The Deputy Governor of the Reserve Bank, Mr. Daniel Minele. And the reason we've got Jabu Mabuza here, he helped a great deal to make sure that we go as a united team on this visit. Now, in addition, the person who's not here but who stayed throughout the trip, much to his credit, is Mr. Christo Visa, and he was there right up to Thursday in New York. Now, the purpose was to meet as many investors who are holding either bonds or shares or equities in the South African market. If we take a total of all of the firms that were represented and the assets that they have under their management, it probably runs into tens of trillions of dollars. In respect of ourselves, the investors that we met hold in excess of 600 billion rands of the total of approximately 2 trillion rands that we have as government debt. So these are very important role players who will still play a role in providing debt to South Africa or investing in the Joburg Stock Exchange in the future, and therefore it was important to explain to them what is the budget about, what are the fiscal numbers about, where do we see growth coming from in the South African economy, and so on. Amongst the more than 250 individuals that we saw, and the number of asset management and other investment companies, the questions that they asked primarily were about these main categories. Firstly, they understood from the budget what our fiscal framework was, but we're interested in what were the fiscal risks that we faced. In other words, if we say we're going to have a 2.4% deficit 3 years from now, what could potentially endanger the achievement of that deficit? How determined was government to achieve that deficit, and whether we had the space to do so both on the expenditure side and on the fiscal side. The answers to those questions were very obvious and clear, that as a country we've shown a great deal of fiscal discipline over the 20 years of democracy, and we intend to continue to do so, that we had a lot of space, if we needed it, to cut expenditure further, and in fact in commencing a new cycle for the next budget, we'll be taking a very careful look at many programs in a different kind of way in order to establish what do we really need to spend money on in government, and what can we do without as government as well, if the circumstances around us don't change, if growth doesn't become higher, and if revenue doesn't actually increase as well. Clearly, the second area of risk is growth. So there was a lot of focus on growth. Where are you going to get economic growth from? And if the economy slows down, what options do you have? And again, we were able to address those questions, but I'll come back to the issue of growth in a moment. The third issue is what kind of imposition are the state-owned companies and their financial status making on the fiscus, and what risks do they pose? You'll be aware that for some time now, we've been saying as government, and this has been reinforced by the Deputy President, who's now leading a government team on the reform of state-owned enterprises or companies and the implementation of the Presidential Review Commission and its recommendations on state-owned companies, that the ideal state we want to get to in a few years' time is that many of these companies operate on the strength of their own balance sheets, that we want to undertake a review of the minor state entities that you see, particularly at a provincial level, and understand what level of overlap and duplication there is, so that we can rationalize many of the smaller ones, whilst attending to the governance, management, and financial stability in each of the major ones that we are dealing with. The question of business confidence in our economy was raised as well, and that is why it was good to have both our labor partners and business people on our delegation who were able to say that they are working very closely with government, as you've seen over the last 2 months in particular, to create a better climate for investment, not just from foreigners, but from South Africans themselves. And what we are clear about is that we can go on analyzing the global economy, its direction, the volatility in this economy, the levels of uncertainty created in the global economy as well. No clear picture emerging from the G20.
We just moved the microphone outside.
You're going to pay for that. We're running short of money, you know that, right? Okay, no, thank you. So let me make that point in a shorter way, that notwithstanding what is happening in the global economy and all the uncertainties and volatility that we see in the global economy, we as South Africans, labor, government, and business, have to take co-responsibility for our own economy. We've got to use the resources we have in order to generate confidence amongst our own investors, let alone anybody else. And this is the area on which both Mr. Mabuza and I were given responsibility for in the 9th of February meeting in Cape Town, convened by the President and the Deputy President, where some 120 business people attended that discussion to generate ideas on how best to actually get concrete activity going, which will indicate to the world that we're serious about economic growth. But more importantly, one of the tests that they put to us is what milestones must we watch for? In other words, no point in just telling us you're going to do X. What are the milestones that will indicate to us that you're making progress towards X at the end of the day? So it tells us something about the global awareness about our economy. I'll come back to the other aspects in a moment. And the credibility that we've got to win back as a society and as an economy amongst all of our sectors. The issue of labor stability was raised, which our trade union colleagues were able to address, both in terms of what we're doing currently and what we hope to do in the future. The Deputy Governor in particular had to address monetary policy issues and how they saw inflation trends and how they would deal with those trends. Is it this week, Deputy Governor?
Starting from tomorrow.
Starting from tomorrow. So you want to give an early indication at some stage. But equally important in our environment is regulatory clarity. In other words, when will the MPRDA bill be processed by Parliament? Can we have a date? When will you resolve some of the other uncertainties that we might have? And fortunately, government did meet under the chairpersonship of the President about 2 Fridays ago, where these items were all on a list of items that different departments have to attend to and give timelines on, and with a greater deal of urgency begin to show that we're dealing with them and give some certainty to the investment world. They also, of course, picked up from everything you report on the political environment in the country, and from time to time raised issues on that as well. So let me end by saying that very clearly the key message we come back with is that the world is watching South Africa very carefully, this investor world. Many of them have been invested in South Africa for a long period of time in bonds and equities. They still have confidence that as a leadership team, both within government and outside of government, we have the ability and the resources to put growth on the agenda again and move to higher levels of growth and confidence in our own economy. The time is now for South Africans to show a similar confidence in the economy and to demonstrate that we are capable of working together, and I'm convinced we are, and to ensure that people who doubt our credibility in this regard are given constant signals, but more importantly evidence, that business, labor and government will take more and more strides in the right direction to ensure that all of the resources that we command individually are brought to bear in the national interest at the end of the day. We repeat finally the message that we gave during the budget, that we are indeed a resilient country. But South Africans need to be aware that with the Moody's visit commencing on Wednesday this week, where they'll be meeting various role players in our economy and society, asking some tough questions about where are we going, where are we heading, do we have the right level of investment, do we have the right level of confidence, and is this government demonstrating that it has a firm grip on the fiscus, amongst many other questions that they will ask. We need to be aware of South Africans, as South Africans, that we need to provide very concrete evidence over the next few months that we are not just talking, that we are not just delivering new plans and new proposals. It's time for collective action, concrete action, and demonstrable action, which the world can say, yes, we believe these guys. And I'm convinced that we are able to deliver on that in a few months' time as we go forward, so that we can begin to address the issues not only of growth, but inclusivity, poverty, unemployment, and inequality in our society. So let me pause there. Maybe to add some spice, one of the ratings agencies did say to us that they had a review meeting set up for immediately after the budget, but as soon as they saw whatever the budget, they cancelled that review meeting and will wait until June in order to make up their minds on where our ratings stood. So even our interactions with the 3 ratings agencies, including senior people from Moody's, was an extremely constructive interaction, and one, I hope, will mean that we'll be given some breathing space to demonstrate that we can concretely take South Africa's economy in a very different direction. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Minister. We will take questions. Please identify yourself and the media house you represent before you ask your question. We shall start in the front, Stephen.
Good morning, good afternoon. Stephen Crudges from Eyewitness News.
Good afternoon. Stephen Critters from Eyewitness News. Minister, I took your health warning at the beginning seriously, but I'm going to have to ask the obvious question, I'm afraid.
And I have the right to not answer, but go ahead.
Absolutely.
We're a democracy, so you must ask.
The Gupta family, to your knowledge, did they or a member of their companies or Jesse Duarte offer Deputy Minister Mcebisi Jonas the position of Finance Minister?
I think on the second point that you make, on the question of Ms. Duarte, we issued a statement this morning as Treasury, indicating that what the Sunday Times said was a senior source in the Treasury is one that is unknown to us, that we know nothing about that, and in any event, so-called senior officials are not required to enter into the political terrain on these sorts of matters, and if you do find out that somebody crossed the line, we'll deal with that, but we can assure Ms. Duarte that the Treasury is not in the habit of engaging in this kind of conduct.
And the first part of my question?
That my silence tells it all.
And Mary?
Thank you. Miriam Issa from the Sunday Times. One of the concerns which investors consistently raise about South Africa's economy is the need for labor reform. I was wondering on this trip whether the investors that you met raised that question again, and what sort of response did our labor representatives give them, and what sort of assurances could they give them about increased labor stability in the country?
Okay, we'll take the next one, right next to Mary.
Thank you, Minister. Sam Kokeli from Business Day. Could you please give us an example on the political questions that were asked on the roadshow? Thank you. Some specifics, examples. Thank you.
Olan Imbanjwa from the City Press newspaper. Minister, you spoke about political questions that were raised by investors. One would assume that the question of the so-called 912, what happened to the former Minister Nhlanhla Nene, there have been reports that indeed investors raised those concerns. What was the response of the delegation or the minister to that? And also, did they raise any issues about the rift between you and the SARS Commissioner Tom Moyane, and what was your response to those questions? Thank you.
Okay, one last question for this round.
Thank you. Hajra Marji from Power FM. Minister, I'm going to push you a little bit on your silence. Should we take that to mean that is a confirmation that Mcebisi Jonas was offered the position of finance minister by the Guptas under certain conditions? Secondly, you said that those that you met asked for milestones and progress, as well as evidence that we are progressing and not just talks and plans. What should those milestones be that we should watch for? And then while you were away, former President Kgalema Motlanthe said to us that he's concerned about the rate in which government is borrowing money, which includes SOEs. He gave a number of 11 billion rand a day was being borrowed internationally by government and SOEs. Did any of those that you met with raise any issues around whether or not they're concerned about South Africa's ability, our ability as taxpayers, to pay back those huge sums?
Okay, thank you. That is it for this round. Minister,
for the others. On the question of labor reform, my labor colleague will address that. In terms of the political questions and 912, 912 was raised by many. It's a phenomenon that we mustn't think stayed within the borders of South Africa. Anybody and everybody that has an interest in South Africa observed what was happening at the time. All they want is indications of stability, and we assured them as the Treasury that we are here to do a piece of work, and we will continue to do that piece of work as long as we can, and we're prepared to serve the country as is required. Moyane and company, often you guys get it wrong. You know, Moyane is not a minister. He's the equivalent of the head of an administration. So that's the first one. There's no equality between Moyane and a minister. Secondly, the president has said he's got a process that's dealing with this matter, so let's give it a bit of time. But certainly that issue was raised as well. I think those are enough as specifics, if you like, on the political side. Then on Deputy Minister Jonas, which Stephen, you asked as well, so let me, since Hajra is pushing on your behalf, I have no personal knowledge of this, so there's nothing I can tell you. You've addressed the question while I was away to the Treasury. You have a response on the record. I think when there is anything further to add, we'll let you know. But that's the response as we stand. On borrowing, I think the DG must do some work now. So 11 billion rands is not much. But let me ask our colleague to first address the labor issue. Check if Mr. Kovadia wants to say anything on the business milestones, and if anybody in the front there wants to add.
Thanks, Minister. I hope you can hear me from, can you?
Oh, you've got that point
Yes.
as well, okay.
Yes. Thank you, Minister. As mentioned, my name is Joseph Makageni. I'm the president of NACTO, National Council of Trade Unions, but as I sit here, I represent FEDUSA and COSATU, because we're all of us in the roadshow. Regarding the question on the labor reform and labor stability, I hope you understand that for now, there are two issues that are under a committee led by the Deputy President of the country, Mr. Cyril Ramaphosa. One of them is the Labor Relations Amendment that deals with before workers or employees go to a legal protected industrial action, they go for ballots. That issue, almost all the unions have got that in their constitutions. If not, it's just few, and we're encouraging. Secondly, the prolonged and violent strikes or industrial action. I hope also you are aware that there's a task team under the auspices of NEDLEC that is dealing with that matter to ensure that if the strike is very long, because for the first before that, we don't actually need strikes, whether it's protected or not protected, but it's a right that we have as workers, as labor movement. Where do we start? We're saying let's improve the labor relations at the workplace so that it does not lead. But if it leads to that, because it's our constitutional right, it must go peacefully. It must not be long. If it is long, there's a process already in NEDLEC to look at the issue of arbitration awards that can declare the strike legal or illegal or protected or unprotected if it has not passed the image that I've said, your ballot and your non-violent, because we are opposed to that. As such, a number of investors indeed understand where we come from, because fortunately, whilst we were in Europe, there was a dispute around the corner, and the workers were to go to a protected industrial action. So we saw it in practice, but it should be non-violent. It should not be long. It should look at issues. It should be balloted so that members of unions, indeed, in their majority, must agree with that process. Thanks, Mr.
Thank you, Minister. Look, the big issue is this, the report of the Economic Forum that came out measured South Africa to be dead last when it comes to labor relations between employers and workers. Now, such a situation is only going to downward spiral us even further, and it will not support inclusive economic growth. Organized labor has put a proposal on the table that they want to have a deep engagement with business and with government on how do we improve productivity in South Africa within the context of total factor productivity, and how can we support inclusive economic growth and job creation. So those are the kinds of discussions that we want to have, and as the Minister indicated, the actions has to be following up on a very short time, because it's important that we make our country more globally competitive so that we can export more. Thank you.
Just on the issue of milestones and evidence of real concrete action. This was raised virtually at every meeting, and our response has been that there is an interaction between business and government currently. Some of us are of the view that this interaction is very concrete. It's led by chief executive officers who are very seized with the interaction. We've also met with labor, all three federations, and they are talking to their members about actually joining the government business initiative, so that it's a tripartite initiative that actually drives this. As part of this initiative, we've, as business, indicated that we are working on a number of issues. One is to look at industries that are on the backs at the moment, like mining, agriculture, construction, and to actually meet with chief executive officers of corporations in those industries and develop real concrete investment projects to actually get them off the back. Also to look at industries that with growth potential, but we believe we haven't fully exploited that growth potential, like tourism, like export-led manufacturing. And again, to meet with CEOs there and see what sort of investments we should be looking at. And that work has started, it's ongoing, and in what we've indicated to investors is that in the next 3 months, we will put on the table what the plans are and what the time frames are for actually rolling those out, so that we are concretely showing that we've got the plan and we will roll them out. We're also looking at areas of enterprise development, particularly small and medium enterprises, both existing and new, and there we're looking at things like a development equity fund to which business and government will contribute to provide appropriate financing, non-financial support. We're talking to government about red tape and regulations that actually make it very difficult for businesses to start in this country, and we're talking to corporates to say that we need an economy that actually enables entry to small and medium enterprises. So in major corporates, procurement chains, and other areas of activity, to ensure that we allow a situation for SMEs to actually participate in those. And we will put some concrete stuff on the table around that in the next 3 months as well. So that's the commitment from business, all the work we're doing to actually really show traction. And we believe that if we have this tripartite arrangement related to that we can actually take that up even a notch further.
And the final point was about government borrowing. So we have to respectfully disagree with the former Deputy President. And we've spoken about the 11 billion before. Shouldn't be strange to you, but let the Director General explain.
Maybe I should start by just explaining the most important part of the borrowing situation, which is that if you want to work out how much we borrow, which adds to our debt on a net basis per week, you should take the financing requirement number and divide it by 49. It will not come to 11 billion. And of course, let me add quickly then to that, which an important point, which is that our debt is affordable, it is sustainable. We are very transparent about it. The reason the market is lending us money is because they know the situation, not only now, but also it projected into the future. It is important, of course, as the budget that was presented on the 14th sought to demonstrate that we must stabilize that debt. It must cease to rise. It must reach the peak and possibly, in fact, definitely begin to fall beyond that point. Where does 11 billion come from? The difference between what you will get when you divide that financing number by 49, which is the number of weeks, is that government does have to borrow more in any given week to finance the mismatch between the inflows in the different revenues and the outflows in terms of the expenditures, what we transfer to local government, provinces, and departments as per the requisitions. So a significant part of that is cash management. It's cash management largely relating to treasury bills, the maximum or the longest of which is a year. So if you look at the treasury bill line on a table in the chapter on asset and liability management, you will see that we reflect there usually the net change in treasury bills. So that's the number that represents an addition to the stock of debt. The other bit gets offset by the cash that comes in and the fact that some of those treasury bills on a regular basis are redeemed.
Those who want further elaboration stay after the press conference. We'll give you a lecture on it.
Okay, shall we take one last round of questions, please? And we will start that side of the room and move that way. Thank you. Sorry, we didn't get... Oh, yes,
yes.
Thank you.
Tulasizwe Semelane from eNCA. Minister, I've got a question that is political and a question that has to do with the economic aspects of the roadshow that you undertook. The question that is political, in your statement that you issued in response to reports that there's a new deadline now for you to answer the questions from the Hawks by 1600 hours today, you have said that there's a word that you used, the Hawks and those that instruct them. I find that quite interesting, and it's not the first time you have suggested that there's more to this investigation by the Hawks and the questions particularly as they relate to you. So if you would, because it's really a serious allegation that the Hawks are not being instructed by the structures and the command team that we all expect them to be constitutionally. So if you could just elaborate a little bit what you mean by that, and those people who are not, who don't have the best interests at heart of South Africa. Could corporate capture have anything to do with all of that? Corporate capture of the state. Then secondly, if I could ask you about Minister Mcebisi Jonas, you and the Deputy Minister Mcebisi Jonas, you and the Deputy Minister enjoy a good working relationship as far as I can tell. Did he confide in you about any meetings that may have taken place? Because if you say 9/12 was so significant, it even left our shores and was raised on so many levels. Surely at some point he must have said to you that, before you came in, this happened. If you can clarify that. And then a broad question on the economics of it all. Minister, the roadshow you've undertaken, has it given you any new insights in terms of what are the immediate things that need to happen to avoid a ratings downgrade? And is a ratings downgrade our major concern, or it's one thing to worry about a ratings downgrade, but we are actually in a vehicle that's headed downslope? How do we get this vehicle moving up again? And are we focusing enough on both of those things? And where does the NDP fit in all of that? I know it's a wide-ranging question, but I'm hoping to get as much from you as possible. Thank you.
Equals 3 here.
Okay, and please be brief with your questions in the interest of time. Thank you.
Good afternoon, Minister, and thank you for taking my question. It's Bonola from the New Age. I just wanted to find out, how would you rate the media's coverage on what has been dubbed the SARS wars? Do you think the media has been fair in its coverage? And secondly, since the country's economy teeters towards junk status, do you think that the media has, if I could say, poured oil on the already fanning flames of South Africa's economy? Thank you.
Afternoon, Minister. Funeko from Reuters. I wanted to ask, after the roadshow, has Treasury reconsidered issuing an international bond? Thank you.
Okay.
Hi, thanks. It's Hannah Zaidi from MoneyWeb. Just two questions. The one, did any investors raise concerns over the ruling party alliance? And kind of, was any discomfort expressed around that alliance and the power that Labour appears to wield over the ruling party? And then another question on the budget review, did investors express any kind of disappointment on, we wanted to see that in the budget review, or this in terms of tax changes or anything related to the budget that they were hoping to see and didn't see? Thanks.
Okay, a quick one while we're getting the mic to this side.
Minister, it's Angelo Coppola from CCTV. Two questions very briefly. Did investors express any concern about existing legislation besides the Mining Act? Was there any other legislation they were anxious about? And then secondly, if we do get downgraded, what's plan B?
Thank you. Go ahead.
Thank you, Minister. Good afternoon. It's Renee Volgra from Bloomberg. Minister, linking to the Hawks question of earlier, I just wanted to know, in the letter yesterday you said that neither you nor your lawyers received such a letter by Friday the 11th. So have you or your lawyers since received the letter that the Hawk is referring to? And then also, will you be responding in any way to the letter if you or your lawyers have received it?
Okay.
Hi, Minister. Hi, Minister. Michael from ANN7. You've said you have no public knowledge, or you have no personal knowledge of the alleged meeting which took place between your deputy and the Guptas and Duduzane Zuma. Despite your lack of personal knowledge, are you going to be approaching your deputy to gain clarity on whether or not this alleged meeting took place, as the Guptas have come out and stated that Atul Gupta was out of the country at the time? So just to remove the cloud around the issue. Thank you.
Natasha from the Business Day. Sorry, Minister, the question is related to governance at SARS. I just wanted to find out whether the advisory board under the leadership of Judge Frank Kroon is going to be dissolved, or whether it's going to be, its term is going to be extended, or it's going to be changed. I just wanted clarity on that. Thanks.
I'm Feril Hafaji from City Press. Sir, may I ask if you've ever been courted by, been to a meeting with, or visited the Gupta family? And secondly, if I could ask for the... Sorry. And may I ask, what would be the top 5 things on the table's agenda as concrete evidence or milestones to be met over the 3 months before we face the next ratings set of inquiries?
Last question. Thank you.
Hi, good afternoon. And Zagisi Mashangani from Business Day. Just on the, to add on the...
You're hiding. Okay.
Just on the, to add on the questions that have been asked on downgrades, did investors say anything about a downgrade to junk and whether they would still find South Africa attractive should that happen? Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Minister.
Okay, on the downgrade matter, I think the one thing we should clarify is that Moody's, that is visiting South Africa this week, has us 2 notches above sub-investment grade. So even if we do have a downgrade, it'll still be in line with the other ratings agencies. I think for the novices in this field, it's important for you to understand that. So yes, a couple of the investors did raise the downgrade issues. Some even said, we don't take the ratings agencies seriously. We have our own analyses of the country, and that actually guides us. By and large, I think ratings agencies and what they say is important from the point of view that they are affirming that we have the ability and willingness to pay. That's what they're supposed to pass judgment on. But now it goes into growth, political circumstances, and so on as well. So let me reaffirm, I think, what the Director General was saying, is that we do have the ability and the willingness to pay. We have a very sustainable debt trajectory from this point onwards, and that part of our intent over the medium term is to taper off debt to GDP below 50%, which is well below the upper limit of 60% that used to apply in days gone by. On new insights from the Roadshow. Yeah, the new insight is that they listen to everything you say very carefully. So that relates to the other question as well. People who are invested in any country, this is not unique to South Africa. It'll be the same with Turkey, with Brazil, with any other emerging market country that might have one or other phenomenon developing. And we are not the worst off in the world, so be assured of that as well. There are many countries that are in a worse position than ourselves. And therein lies our optimism, that we do have the possibility as a country to actually pull our socks up, get proper things done, do it the right way, unite all the good people in this country who want to contribute to growth and employment and development, and overcome the historic problems that we have. And we'll be much better for it in 2 or 3 years' time than we are at the moment. And I'm convinced of that as well. On the question of the role of the media and junk status, I'll let you judge that. If I say to you that everybody is watching South Africa very carefully, and they see sometimes an embattled nation, then we've got to ask the question, what's the public narrative we're putting across in South Africa, and how we deal with some of these issues? Have we reconsidered an international bond raising? No. Why should we reconsider? When the time is right and the market is right, the Director General and his colleagues will make the decision to do whatever we need to do. We make sure that we don't pass the 10% mark in terms of debt in foreign currency, which is a decision made some time ago, followed since then, which has held us in extremely good standing. So the bulk of our borrowing is in rand from South Africa. So when the time is right, the officials concerned will make the right decision. The power of Labour, well, Labour was with us for 1.5 days, so nobody ran out of the room because they saw Labour with us. They appreciated the fact that business and Labour were part of the single delegation. They appreciated the fact that we had this broad united front representing the interests of this country, and passionate about it as well. Every single member who was in the delegation. The budget review and what's missing? No, many raised the question like you did immediately after the budget, where's the VAT? So we pointed out there was no need for VAT at this stage. Whether it's VAT or another kind of levy, or it's the tax you're going to pay on the next sugary cold drink that you're going to have, or the next income bracket that we might introduce, those are all options available to us in the next 2 years. So they were quite satisfied with that answer. Any concerns about other laws? No, not really, except they want certainty around some of the laws that we might have created uncertainty around. And like I said, from a government point of view, we understand that and will be responding to it. What's the plan if we get downgraded? Get upgraded. Simple plan, but it's not as simple to do. Once you get downgraded, on the average it takes you, what, 5 years or more to work your way up again. So you don't want to end up there as a country for whatever reason. And that's why we make this earnest appeal at all times. Don't worry about all this other news that is circulating in the air. Focus on what's good for the country, what's good for the economy. Let's do our best so that future generations will actually say this generation did try its best and left behind a much better and more stable economy than we might have had before. The ferial question. Which one? Right, so the concrete evidence, I thought you were going to deal with whether you had dinner with the Guptas or not.
The question was to you, Minister. And you said it's a personal one.
So, no, the answer, Ferial, is no. I'm a very quiet person. I stick to my corner. On Natasha, on the advisory board, the deadline is tomorrow. We'll make up our minds. I've been as you can see, busy with other matters until now. So we'll advise you as soon as we've made the decision on that. Mr. Mabuza will address that question. Am I going to approach the DM? I'm sorry, that's my business. If I do, forgive the sharp response, but the Hawks and the letters. Now, what was upsetting about the independent papers yesterday was that the journalists wrote that there was a new letter. So I spent 3 hours looking for this new letter with my attorneys, etc., etc. But the letter that, in fact, she was writing about was a letter of the 3rd of March. And the response to that letter was also sent out with the statement that I issued as well from the attorneys. You might or might not have seen it, but there's a response. And what the response says, amongst other things, is please tell us in terms of what legislation or piece or part of legislation you are doing whatever you're doing. And that, and the statement says, once we have that clarity, we'll take legal advice and do whatever is the right thing to do, and that no one is above the law. So I'm afraid that those front page articles were very misleading. But interestingly, that's the second letter that was leaked. That's the important part. Right? Why do you have to leak these things? If you want to talk about them, have a press conference like us, put all the facts on the table and talk about it. No need to leak in order to malign people. But anyway, let me not get carried away with that. That one is done. You want to answer the
Yes, Minister. Thank
concrete
you.
evidence.
And really, I think you and Team South Africa have really done us proud, Minister. It's a very difficult time for our economy indeed, and thanks to you, South Africans. Minister, to Ferial's question about the 5 milestones, I think firstly, it's just recognizing that there is co-responsibility here, government, labor, and business. Business both as investors and also as employers. And the call that Minister, you and I were tasked by the President was indeed to come up with some concrete ideas, actionable ideas, with clear milestone and time frames. Actually, the President wants us to come back to him with a report by May. Whilst at it, let me just emphasize, this is not a new structure. There are existing structures where government, labor, and business engage, and they are from the Presidential Review Commission, NEDLAC. Those should continue to do the work they do. But this particular exercise was the very first one, this roadshow. But more importantly, the most important thing that the team tried to achieve was at least to get all South Africans just to understand that we are in a crisis stage. The downgrade will push us even further into recession. And I think by and large that we have achieved. Going together, Labour, government and minister on the road shows was indeed a demonstration that we understand that this is an economy that we all have co-responsibility for. We also understand that notwithstanding our various differences that are normal in the nature of the relationship we have, we understand there will be pain, there will be more pain if we get downgraded. There will be trade-offs that we need to make, all of us. The second 2 points, Cass did speak to them, was the 2 projects that have got these other work streams that are working on. The one was on the small and medium enterprise, and the work that is being done there was, as Cass said, identify the many institutions that are funding small and medium enterprise. Look at what it is that are the gaps there, what is it that needs to be improved, and there is a piece of work that Adrian Gore and Brian Joffrey have done to pull this together. We should be ready to be reporting to the minister for sign-off and then take it to the president in due course. And we found that there is more than just the unavailability of money. Money seems to be, there's a lot of. Its ideas is, sounds silly, the difference between turnover and profit. being paid on time. Small business getting their money on time means a lot to them. Currently, government, who are a big supplier to customers of small business and big businesses, they pay 90 days from date of summons. By then, there is no small business around. The other area was on these vulnerable and potentially job-creating industries. And Cas has spoken about that, to see what are the gaps, what are the challenges, what are the opportunities in those. And we are ready in the next week, Minister, to be coming back to you to present the work that Sim Shabalala and Dr. Dan Machila are convening. They've spent a lot of time with the banking community looking at those, as Cas said, from mining to agriculture to tourism, and indeed manufacturing, pharmaceuticals, and such industry. So, Minister, those are the 5 things that we're working on, Fariel, and we do think they are with certain milestones and they are with certain time frames, and we will be able by May to present this and demonstrate that some of this can be done immediately.
Okay, as we round up, I'm going to ask Mr. Manele if you'd like to add a word or two. They have to hear you, you've come all this way,
Microphone somewhere. Oh, I've got them right up here.
You're wired.
Thanks, Minister. Maybe just briefly to indicate the kind of issues that investors raised with regard to monetary policy as we met with them. I think the key issue, not surprisingly, was around this dilemma and the policy dilemma of having to counter rising inflation pressures in an environment of weaker growth. They wanted to understand how we see the risks to the inflation outlook, issues around the depreciation in the currency, the extent of pass-through. Given the adjustment to our forecasts at the time of the January meeting, they wanted to understand what informed. You'd recall that the forecast deteriorated quite sharply, and obviously the discussions and deliberations that informed the 50 basis point adjustment at the time of the meeting. Other issues had to do with the impact that the drought would have on food prices and how that would feed into inflation dynamics, and also the issue around how we assessed the level of our potential growth rate, and of course, not surprisingly, issues around inflation expectations, if we were concerned that risks that come out of the wage setting process might dislodge inflation expectations, what the implications for that might be in terms of the policy. Those were, in the main, the issues that were being asked. There was, I think, 1 or 2 questions in the wake of the developments in December that was asked around central bank independence, and those fears could be allayed.
Okay, the front row, any additions?
Thanks very much. I think just a reflection from my side in terms of being part of the delegation. I think that the Minister made a critical decision to take this trip at this time. We can't underestimate the urgency with which these issues had to be dealt with. And I know he took some political darts for missing his budget debate, but this thing could not have been delayed at all. He had to be over there. And I think that the resounding message that we got from the investors and from the rating agencies, and the rating agencies met privately with the business side as well as meeting with them together, was that our Treasury, Reserve Bank and Ministry have earned enormous respect from the investor and rating agencies. And it's not to be underestimated. And it doesn't happen overnight. And we heard that from many, many of the investors. In terms of the fact that they're still here and listening is as a result of the huge respect that the team has earned over many years. So I think I would just like to add my congratulations. It really was a pleasure to be part of such a professional team over there. And I think the message that we sent, going collaboratively, business, labor, and government, sent a message of change already to that market. They want more from us, but at least this was a signal that sent something very serious to them, that something is different in terms of the way we're addressing this.
Okay, so on that note, we have many things going for us in South Africa. I think more of us need to appreciate that and communicate that, and we can, if we work together, avoid the downgrade, get higher economic growth, and begin to take this country even into higher terrain and better terrain than we might find ourselves at the moment. So we hope our optimism has infected you as well. Thank you very much.